When most people think about where Jewish families thrive in America, they think big: New York, Los Angeles, and South Florida. But those places are expensive, crowded, and for a growing number of families in 2026, no longer the answer. Scattered across the United States are small towns where Jewish communities are not just holding on, they are growing. Towns where a young family from New Jersey can buy a 3-bedroom home for under $200,000 and walk to Shabbat services on a Friday evening. Most have never appeared on any list before now. Now let us begin. Number 10. On the eastern shore of Maryland, about 90 minutes southeast of Baltimore, sits the small city of Easton. Population roughly 16,000. It is a place of red brick storefronts, federal period townhouses, and wide views across the Chesapeake Tidewater. It is not where you would expect to find a thriving Jewish community, but Temple B'nai Israel has stood here since 1893. That is over 130 years of continuous Jewish worship on the Eastern Shore. For most of the 20th century, the congregation was small, a few dozen families, enough to keep the doors open but not much more. Then something shifted. Beginning around 2020, remote workers and early retirees from the Baltimore and Washington corridor began arriving. Talbot County property records show a steady increase in home purchases by families with ties to the congregation. Median home prices in Easton sit around $220,000. For a couple leaving Silver Spring or Bethesda, that is a revelation. The Avalon Foundation provides a performing arts center and cultural programming that would be unusual in a town 3 times this size. The waterfront district has been carefully preserved. On a Friday evening in Easton, you can walk from a restored colonial inn down to the synagogue along streets where the only sound is birdsong and the occasional creak of a sailboat mast from the harbor. A town with one synagogue that has endured for over a century is quietly impressive. But head to the mountains of western North Carolina and you will find a place where the Jewish community doubled in size in under a decade. Number 9. Asheville, North Carolina. Tucked into the Blue Ridge Mountains at an elevation of 2,100 feet. Population approximately 94,000. Known for its art scene, its craft breweries, and the largest private home in the United States, the Vanderbilt family's Biltmore Estate. What it is not known for is Jewish life. But that is changing fast. Congregation Beth Israel was founded here in 1906. For decades, it served a small but committed community. Then the pandemic rewired American migration patterns. Jewish families from Brooklyn, Philadelphia, and the suburbs of Washington began arriving in numbers that local community leaders had never seen. Shabbat of Asheville expanded its programming significantly after 2021. Local Federation surveys noted marked growth across every denomination. The median home price sits around $375,000. That is a fraction of what comparable homes cost in Westchester County or Montgomery County. For a young Jewish couple with 2 children and remote jobs, the arithmetic is overwhelming. They can buy a house with a garden, enroll their children in a Jewish day school, and see the Blue Ridge Parkway from the synagogue car park. At the Asheville Farmers Market on a Saturday morning, challah vendors appeared for the first time in 2022. They have not left. The bread sells out before noon. A mountain city where young Jewish families found affordability and community is a story of reinvention. But in the Texas Hill Country, there is a town where Jewish ranchers and tech workers have built something even more unexpected. Number 8. Fredericksburg, Texas. Population roughly 14,000, located in Gillespie County, about 80 miles west of Austin. The town was founded in 1846 by German immigrants and still carries that heritage in its architecture, its bakeries, and the street names carved into limestone markers along Main Street. Jewish history here is thin. There was no synagogue, no Hebrew school, no established congregation for most of the town's existence. But beginning around 2022, families relocating from California and the Northeast into the Hill Country started finding each other. The Hill Country Jewish Community Organization was formally established to serve families scattered across Gillespie, Kerr, and Kendall counties. What had been informal Shabbat dinners in private homes became structured gatherings in a converted ranch building on the outskirts of town. Median home prices hover around $350,000, still well below Austin metro prices, which have surged past $500,000. Zillow data shows steady appreciation in Fredericksburg, but at a pace that remains accessible to families with moderate incomes. Temple Bethel in San Antonio, roughly 90 minutes south, serves as the regional anchor for life cycle events and high holiday services. The landscape here is unlike anything most Jewish families from the Northeast have ever known. Livestock fences run alongside the road to a Shabbat dinner. Peach orchards stretch behind the building where the Torah is read. On a clear evening, the sky over Fredericksburg holds more stars than most of these families have ever seen in their lives. Jewish families building community in Texas ranch country is a story few would predict. But travel north to a small city in Michigan and you will find a Jewish community so deeply rooted it has shaped the character of the entire town for over a century. Number 7. Ann Arbor, Michigan, home to the University of Michigan and a population of approximately 123,000. The town sits along the Huron River about 40 miles west of Detroit. Most people know it for college football, for the university's medical school, and for a downtown that hums with bookshops and coffee houses 12 months a year. What they may not know is that Ann Arbor has one of the highest per capita Jewish populations in the American Midwest. Estimates place the greater Ann Arbor Jewish community between 15,000 and 20,000 people. Beth Israel Congregation was founded in 1916. The University of Michigan Hillel is one of the largest in the country, serving thousands of Jewish students each year. The Jewish Federation of Greater Ann Arbor reported increased membership and program enrollment since 2022. The town has an ERUV. It has multiple Jewish day schools. It has a JCC that serves as a gathering point for families across every denomination. And it has Zingerman's Delicatessen, a nationally famous institution whose kosher section draws visitors from across the state. Median home prices sit around $450,000. Not cheap. But compared to Brookline, Massachusetts, or Teaneck, New Jersey, where equivalent institutional density exists, it is remarkably accessible. For a professor or a physician relocating from the East Coast, the difference is not marginal, it is transformative. Walk down State Street on a Saturday morning past the university bookshops and the vintage record stores. Turn left at the old theater. Within 10 minutes, you are at the synagogue. The autumn colors along the Huron River are visible from the JCC entrance. In Ann Arbor, Jewish life is not an enclave. It is part of the Weave. A university town where Jewish life is woven into the civic fabric is admirable. But in the Hudson Valley of New York, there is a small city where something more dramatic is unfolding. A Jewish community growing so rapidly that the local housing market has been visibly reshaped. Number 6. Beacon, New York, population roughly 15,000, situated on the eastern bank of the Hudson River, about 60 miles north of Manhattan. For decades, Beacon was a fading factory town. Then Dia Art Foundation opened Dia Beacon in 2003, converting a massive Nabisco box printing factory into one of the most important contemporary art spaces in the country. The town began to change. But the change that matters for this story came later. Beginning around 2022, Jewish families priced out of Westchester, Bergen County, and the outer boroughs of New York City began looking north. Metro North Commuter Rail connects Beacon to Grand Central Terminal in approximately 90 minutes. The median home price sits around $420,000. In Scarsdale or Teaneck, that same money buys a fraction of the space. Beacon Hebrew Alliance, a historic congregation that had dwindled to a handful of members, has seen renewed growth. Chabad of Dutchess County expanded into the area. Local estate agents reported increased inquiries from Orthodox and conservative families beginning in 2022 and accelerating through 2024. On a Friday afternoon in Beacon, the Metro North horn echoes across the river. Families walk home along Main Street past the renovated factory buildings, the galleries, and the coffee shops. Mount Beacon rises green and steep above the rooftops. The light on the Hudson at that hour turns copper and gold. For British viewers, this pattern will feel familiar. It is the same movement that sent young London families to Margate, Hastings, and the Thanet Coast. Cultural infrastructure following affordability. Community forming where the prices allow it. The difference is that these families are also building Eruvin, establishing kosher supply chains, and negotiating the ancient rhythms of Shabbat observance in a town that until very recently had no idea what any of that meant. A Hudson Valley town where Jewish families are building new roots within reach of Manhattan is a story of adaptation. But in the Deep South, there is a city whose Jewish community is not new at all. It has been there for nearly 300 years, and it is experiencing a revival no one saw coming. Number 5. Savannah, Georgia. Population approximately 147,000. Founded in 1733 by General James Oglethorpe as the first city of the Georgia colony. And on the very same ship that carried Oglethorpe's settlers, or arriving just months after, came a group of Jewish families. Congregation Mikveh Israel was established that same year. It is the third oldest Jewish congregation in the United States. The synagogue building itself is extraordinary, one of only 2 Gothic Revival synagogues in the entire country. Its pointed arches and stone tracery rise from a quiet street in the historic district surrounded by live oaks draped in Spanish moss and the elegant squares that give Savannah its distinctive rhythm. For decades, the Jewish community here shrank. Young people left for Atlanta, for Charlotte, for the Northeast. The congregation aged, the pews grew emptier. Then, a combination of forces began to reverse the tide. The Savannah College of Art and Design transformed the local economy, drawing creative professionals and young families. Remote work opened the door further. The Savannah Jewish Federation documented community growth driven by retirees and younger families drawn to the city's architecture, affordability, and pace of life. Median home prices sit around $300,000. The historic district, one of the largest in the United States, provides a quality of streetscape and civic beauty that money cannot easily replicate elsewhere. The Jewish Educational Alliance, founded in 1912, continues to operate as a community hub offering programs from early childhood education to elder care. Walk from a bed and breakfast on Monterey Square through Forsyth Park to Shabbat services at Mikveh Israel, and you are walking through nearly 3 centuries of continuous Jewish presence. The scent of pralines and salt air drifts up from River Street. The congregation that nearly faded is welcoming new members again, not in large numbers, not with fanfare, but steadily. And the doors have not closed once since 1733. A Jewish community, nearly 3 centuries old, experiencing quiet rebirth in the Deep South, is a story of endurance. But head to the suburbs of Pittsburgh and you will find a neighborhood whose Jewish community faced the worst anti-Semitic attack in American history and responded not by leaving but by growing closer together. Number 4. Squirrel Hill, a leafy residential neighborhood in the east end of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, named likely by early settlers for the black squirrels that once filled its oak trees. Population roughly 15,000. About 40% of residents are Jewish. A study by the United Jewish Federation found that 33% of all Jewish people in Greater Pittsburgh live in this one neighborhood alone. Walk down Murray Avenue on any given morning, and within 2 blocks you will pass a kosher bakery, a Jewish day school, a yeshiva, a community center, and a mikveh. More than 20 synagogues serve this neighborhood. Reconstructionist, Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox families all share the same streets. In many Jewish communities across America, the Orthodox segment is culturally and geographically separated from everyone else, not in Squirrel Hill. This neighborhood defied that pattern for a century. On October 27, 2018, a gunman entered the Tree of Life synagogue during Shabbat morning services and killed 11 people. It was the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in American history. 6 others were wounded, including 4 police officers who responded. The community did not fracture, it did not scatter, it drew closer. The Tree of Life building is being redesigned as a memorial and community center. Local organizations reported that donations and volunteer hours increased in the years following the attack, not decreased. The neighborhood's Jewish population has remained stable or grown slightly since 2018. Median home prices in Squirrel Hill sit around $300,000. For a neighborhood with this level of institutional depth, this density of communal life, this history, that number is remarkable. Pittsburgh remains one of the most affordable major metropolitan areas in the United States. The Memorial Garden, where 11 names are inscribed, sits quietly among the trees. The bakery on Murray Avenue still opens before dawn. The children still walk to school along the same pavements. This is a neighborhood that refused to be defined by the worst day in its history. A community that answered hatred with solidarity is extraordinary. But travel to the New Jersey suburbs and you will find a place where Jewish life is not recovering from anything. It never stopped growing. and the scale of what exists there in a borough of barely 14,000 people is quietly staggering. Number 3, Highland Park, New Jersey, a small borough in Middlesex County directly across the Raritan River from the city of New Brunswick and the main campus of Rutgers University. Population approximately 14,000, median home price around $500,000, and an estimated 40 to 50% of residents are Jewish. The numbers alone are striking, but it is the infrastructure that truly sets Highland Park apart. The borough has an ERUV. It has multiple Orthodox synagogues within walking distance of nearly every residential street. It has kosher restaurants, a kosher pizza shop next to the public library, Jewish day schools, and a mikveh. The Orthodox Union has described Highland Park as one of the most walkable Orthodox communities in the United States. The community includes both Ashkenazi and significant Sephardic populations. The proximity to Rutgers provides academic and cultural depth. Young professionals and families relocate here specifically because they will never need to drive on Shabbat. Every essential institution of observant daily life is reachable on foot within 15 minutes. Walk along Raritan Avenue on a weekday afternoon, and you will notice the ERUV markers on the telephone poles along the borough boundary. You will see families with pushchairs on every block. You will hear Hebrew and English mixing in the queue at the bakery. In Highland Park, the infrastructure of Jewish life is not something grafted onto an existing town. It is the town. 14,000 residents, half of them Jewish, everything within walking distance. This is not a suburb with a synagogue. It is a community so complete in its institutional density that it rivals places 10 times its size. A borough where half the population is Jewish and the entire infrastructure of observant life sits within a 15-minute walk is remarkable. But our second town is growing at a pace that defies demographic logic, and the community driving that growth has transformed an entire stretch of the New Jersey coast into something that has no parallel anywhere. Number 2, Toms River, New Jersey. Located in Ocean County along the Jersey Shore. Population approximately 95,000, known for decades as a quiet seaside retirement community. Affordable, unhurried, unremarkable. That description no longer applies. The story of Toms River in 2026 cannot be told without first understanding Lakewood. Lakewood Township, roughly 15 miles to the south, has experienced one of the most extraordinary population surges in American history. Driven by the growth of its Orthodox Jewish community and anchored by Beth Midrash Govoha, one of the largest centers of Jewish learning in the world, Lakewood's population surged from roughly 60,000 in 2000 to over 135,000 by 2020. The growth has not stopped, but Lakewood's housing costs have risen with its population, and families who need more space, lower prices, or simply more room to breathe have begun moving outward. Toms River, Jackson Township, and Brick Township have all absorbed significant numbers of Orthodox Jewish families in recent years. The evidence is visible on the ground. New synagogues have opened in shopping centers and converted commercial buildings. Yeshivas have enrolled students in neighborhoods that had none 5 years ago. Kosher groceries have appeared in strip malls between nail salons and pizza chains. Median home prices in Toms River sit around $400,000. Compared to Lakewood, where competition for family-sized homes is fierce, that represents breathing room. New ERUV posts stand along suburban roads that 5 years ago had none. The sound of children walking to a yeshiva can be heard along pavements that were designed entirely for car commuters. This growth has generated real friction. Zoning disputes, school funding debates, and development controversies have made local headlines. These tensions are honest and they affect real people on every side. But the demographic reality is undeniable. An Orthodox Jewish community that was concentrated in a single township is now reshaping an entire county. The momentum has not slowed. A community expanding outward at a pace that is reshaping entire townships is a demographic event without easy comparison. But our final destination is a town where Jewish families are not spilling over from somewhere else. They chose this place. They were invited. They uprooted their lives based on a promise. And what they have built in barely 2 decades may be the most unlikely Jewish story in America today. Number 1, Dothan, Alabama, Houston County, population roughly 71,000, located in the far southeastern corner of the state, closer to the Florida Panhandle than to Birmingham. The flat agricultural landscape stretches in every direction. Peanut fields run to the horizon. This is the self-proclaimed peanut capital of the world. It is not where anyone would look for a thriving Jewish community. Temple Emmanuel was founded in Dothan in 1929. For most of the 20th century, the congregation was sustained by a small cluster of Jewish merchant families whose roots in the town ran deep. But by the early 2000s, the numbers were falling. Children grew up and left for Atlanta, for Mobile, for cities with larger Jewish populations and more professional opportunities. The congregation dropped below 100 families. The future looked like slow disappearance. Then Larry Blumberg stepped in, a local businessman and longtime member of Temple Emmanuel Bloomberg, and the congregation launched a relocation program in 2007. The offer was direct and unprecedented. Jewish families willing to move to Dothan, purchase a home, and commit to active community participation would receive financial assistance of up to $50,000. The program drew national media coverage. The New York Times reported on it. NPR broadcast features from Dothan streets. The Associated Press sent the story across the wire. Families came from New York, from New Jersey, from South Florida. They arrived in a place where the nearest large Jewish community was hours away by car. They enrolled their children in local schools. They joined the congregation. They bought homes at prices that defied belief. Median home prices in Dothan, 2026, sit around $160,000. For a family arriving from Bergen County or Palm Beach, that figure does not seem real. The program did not create a massive community. This is not Lakewood. There are no yeshivas lining every road, no ERUV spanning the town boundary. What it created was stability. A congregation that was weeks or months from a terminal decline now has young families in its pews. Children attend Sunday school who would never have set foot in Alabama without that initial invitation. On a Friday evening in Dothan, the synagogue parking area is full. Not overflowing, not chaotic, just full. Families walk through the front door into a building that a generation ago sat half empty. The fields beyond the town limits are dark and quiet. The stars above Houston County are thick and low. Inside, the lights are on. Children's voices carry down the corridor. The door stays open.